Welcome to another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Greisman. This is a very special episode for me personally and for all of the audience. We're sitting in the office of Amir Ohana, the Speaker of the Israeli Knesset in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, the capital of the Jewish people. Amir Ohana is a very special person. He's been in the position of Speaker since December 2022. He joined the Knesset in 2015, trained as an attorney, and he's a part of the Likud party. The Likud party is headed by the current Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, and was established in, I believe, 1973 by Menachem Begin. This is a very, very complex time in Israel. I spent the week here with my family, and we're going to talk about a few topics. First, the military aid package that was just passed by the United States, his visit to the U.S. in support of that, the issues of support waning a little bit in Congress related to the United States, related to Israel, the ICC, and the hostage deal. All of that in 30 minutes. There's so much going on, it's hard to waste the opportunity to not speak about these topics. So thank you so much, Amir, Speaker Ohana.
Welcome to the Knesset, Gabe. It's very good to have you here.
Thank you so much. First, the holiday of Passover just ended, and it was kind of an interesting time to be here. I was here with my family, where you're celebrating liberation from Exodus, liberation of the Jewish people from Egypt, coming over to Israel, to the land of Israel. It's usually such a joyous time, and we have to struggle to how do we teach our kids about this Exodus and how we're here. Now it's a dark time in Israel, and it was there was an interesting dichotomy between shade and sunshine almost during this week. How was the holiday for you and your family?
Well, as you said, it is very significant times, shall we say. We wish sometimes maybe we would have some dull moments, but never a dull moment here in Israel. And these are historic times, very challenging times, probably the most difficult times since the country was established. Normally in the holidays, it's time of happiness, but these are not normal times. And although we try to celebrate with our families, but our hearts and our minds are with the hostages and with the bereaved families. So many of them joined this group this year actually. And last year I had a special event here in the Knesset. It was the first time we had a Mimuna, a very festive event that celebrates the end of Pesach by the North African communities, the Moroccan mainly, and that was a first time and supposed to be a tradition. But this year we cannot celebrate it the same way, so we actually didn't. We hope, God willing, that by next year we can celebrate Pesach as the holiday of freedom that symbolizes freedom for all our 133 hostages that still remain in captivity by Hamas, and that we can remove the various threats over our country and our people for many, many years to come.
Yeah, obviously, everybody's hoping and praying for the same thing and strategizing and working towards that. What do you feel, what do you sense is the pulse of the country? Before October 7th, there was a big divide on judicial reforms and different issues, social issues. I was here in November and I felt a big sense of unity, as we discussed a little before off camera. I came back and I'm starting to feel those same divisions, but I'm only here for a few weeks. What's your sense of the pulse of the country?
This is one of our major challenges. Before October 7th, we were basically at each other's throats regarding the judicial reform, the controversies, the differences between us. And it seems as many of us have forgotten the real threats to this country and to our people. And our enemies took advantage of that on October 7th. But then, as you stated, our soldiers jumped in to the event, those who supported the judicial reform as well as those who opposed it, those who support the government as well as those who oppose it. And they left their differences aside. They put it aside, managing to fight shoulder to shoulder, to risk their lives for each other. And so should we. And many of us in the Israeli society and politics did it following October 7th, and we can feel the sense of unity in the Knesset we expanded the coalition. We have passed more than 70 pieces of legislation since October 7th, most of them regarding the war, the families of the hostages, the reserve military, and so on. And almost all of it unanimously, which, let me tell you, was not a very common thing before October 7th. So we must work to maintain this unity because our threats still exist, and they are very serious, very grave. And for us to be able to pass through these difficult times, not only when we survive, but as we did throughout history, when we are getting even stronger, we need to stand together. It means that each side will have to compromise and will have to see the upsides of the other sides rather than their downsides.
Yeah, the struggle that I'm seeing when I speak to people in the opposition and that are out there protesting, I speak to some people, yes, I have some friends on the other side.
Same as me.
Yeah, and like I said, I'd rather have friends on the other side because I'm always right and they're always wrong. But you know, what I see them struggling with, the people that are there for good faith, is how they understand that they need to show unity, there needs to be unity, and that there's a risk of having this sort of break in society, a risk that we saw on October 7th play out, but how to balance that with their desire to sort of push a political agenda, etc. But it's a tough balance, and I think...
You know, we were all born to a world where the State of Israel exists. It's a fact. I always used to say, let us learn from the former generations, from those who were born to a world like your grandparents, that the State of Israel did not exist. They can appreciate the fact of the existence of this country more than us, so we should learn from them. I think on October 7th, many Israelis got the sense of how would a world with no State of Israel would look like. And it's a challenge for us to keep that state of mind. We need to work hard to maintain and to keep and to preserve this miracle of the Jewish state. And this is what I'm planning to do, and I hope many of my colleagues plan to do.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just jump in a little bit. A big military aid package was finally passed by the U.S. Congress. I know it's something you've been working on for a long time. You visited, I think, 2 months ago with Speaker Johnson in Washington, D.C. First, tell me a little bit about that visit and what this military aid really means to the State of Israel.
I got to know Speaker Johnson first time in 2019. I was back then the Minister of Justice of the State of Israel, and Mike was a young congressman, and he came for a visit, and we had a good meeting. But what I could sense back then is how much this guy loves Israel and how much he loves the Jewish people. And I was very happy to learn that he became Speaker of the House. And when I congratulated him for being elected, I also invited him to come here to the Knesset to address the plenary, basically to address the people of Israel, which I hope he can make it. It's going to be historic. Only 2 speakers before him did it. The first one was Newt Gingrich in the 90s, and the second one was my good friend Kevin McCarthy. And we hope that Mike can make it as well. He invited me to Washington, and I thought it would be a good idea not to come by myself. So I brought a delegation of members of Knesset of both sides of the aisle, opposition and coalition, as well as families of hostages of 3 faiths, Christians, Muslim, and Jews. And we presented a united front, not only to Speaker Johnson, but also to members of Senate, as well as House, Democrats, Republicans, which is exactly what we should do now, to present a united front to return all the hostages to their families and to bring a total, unmitigated defeat to Hamas. Something that is not going to be controversial, something that will be very clear. And this is something I think will be beneficial not only for the Jewish state and the Jewish people, but also for the residents of Gaza. If Hamas stays we can only imagine how the future would look like. They openly say October 7th was only the first time. We will have a second, a third, a fourth, until we can eradicate Israel off the map. And this means that the cycle of violence shall continue on and on and on. So for the benefit of the Gazans and for the future of the Gazan children, we should eradicate Hamas that uses them as their human shields. This is their strategy, to operate not only to target Israeli civilians, which is a war crime, with every rocket that they fire, and of course on October 7th, but they do so operating from heavily populated residential areas, using the children and the women of Gaza as their shields, because they think Israel would not be able to defend itself. Because if it will, there will be casualties, civilian casualties, and the world will stop Israel. So they use the world's hypocrisy as their Iron Dome. Because no people would accept that a terror attack such as this that we have experienced on October 7th should take place, and they would not retaliate by eradicating the terror organization that did so. You know, there's a story about former American President George W. Bush, and the Israeli Prime Minister back then, Ehud Olmert, was summoned up to President Bush to explain what it is that Israel does in Gaza. It was yet another cycle of violence back then. And he said, Mr. President, they are firing at our civilians. We must defend our civilians. This is the number one goal of every country. This is what America would do. Imagine that Mexico would fire rockets on American soil, on American residents, on American civilians. In 24 hours, there would be no Mexico. And the president asked, why? And Prime Minister said, well, Mr. President, what do you mean why? How else can you defend your... No. Why 24 hours? So we have no intention to eradicate Gaza off the map. We don't want to do so. We want to eradicate Hamas off the map. And this is what we do. We pay very heavy prices for that. We lose our sons, our brothers, and daughters, by the way, almost every week. And we know that this price has to be paid for us to secure the lives of our civilians. By the way, not only down south, but also up north, because Hezbollah, a very well-equipped, very strong terror organization, also operates there. And we have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of refugees, Israeli refugees, that are displaced from their houses for more than half a year now, more than 200 days. To secure their lives, we need to deal with Hamas and with Hezbollah, which is exactly what our holy soldiers are doing as we speak.
So there was a lot of controversy in the United States in the Congress about the
we didn't talk about the aid.
That's right.
Let me go back to the aid.
I was going to follow up. What does the aid mean to Israel?
Okay. So when we were in Washington, we spoke to Speaker Johnson and as well as other members of Congress. Not only that we need the aid, yes, but we need the message it brings with it. And the message is that America stands by Israel. This is probably even more important than the aid itself, because America is not just another country on the globe. America is the leader of the free world, and it should convey a message to the enemies of the free world. Because, you know, we can talk about Hamas, we can talk about Hezbollah, we can talk about the Houthis, the Shiite militias, on and on and on. These are all merely proxies of the real thing, of the head of the snake, Iran, that funds and trains and weaponizes these organizations. And when you are looking at the map, look at the way Iran treats their civilians. How are human rights on Iran? Women rights, LGBT rights, freedom of speech. How can you support Hamas or Gaza? You know, when I see queers for Gaza, queers for Hamas, you know what I see? Chickens for KFC. Turkeys for Thanksgiving. That's what I see. How are LGBTs treated in Gaza? The same way they are treated in Iran. Being executed, being persecuted, being haunted. And Israel is not just another country as well. In our region, Israel is a symbol. Israel stands for something, and this something is the free world. And so the world, both the free world as well as the enemies of the free world, the enemies of peace, which is Iran. This is exactly what it tried to stop on October 7th. We will go into this later. Needs to see that the leader of the free world, America, the greatest superpower of the world, stands by its allies. And there is not a better ally to America than Israel, as well as there is not a better ally for Israel than America. So for this, I want to thank Speaker Johnson for showing his leadership. It was difficult because of the internal controversies regarding the other issues of this package. And I spoke to Mike back then, as well as following our visit quite a few times. And he said, you know, I know it's going to be challenging, and I know I'm taking a great risk, but I will have the aid come to Israel sooner than later. And he stood by his word. And we are thankful for his leadership, thankful for his friendship, and we wish to welcome him here in Israel, in Jerusalem.
I hope to see him here too. The support from the United States, however, seems towards Israel seems to be waning. We're seeing this week everybody in the Jewish world was waving around this study that came out of, I believe, Harvard on Jewish support, United States support of Israel. The average was 80% of America supports Israel, and everyone was excited. See, it's not so bad. But if you just scratch a little bit at the surface, you see that these are rough numbers, but people over 65, it's 95% of them support Israel. But if you go down to the lowest category of 18 to 24-year-olds, it's 57% that support Israel. So basically, roughly half we lose. And we know that seems about right. And you see college campuses around the United States and young people, even young professionals in places like Google, we saw them have a sit-in. These aren't just isolated incidents. It's all over the country. We're losing it. We're losing the support in the United States for Israel as you go younger in the generations. But we're also seeing that seep into Congress in Capitol Hill. The Israel aid package in the Senate was, like you know, lumped in together with other foreign aid. But in the House, Johnson split everything up. On the Israel package, 58 members of Congress voted against, 37 Democrats and 21 Republicans. We had Schumer and Pelosi calling for Netanyahu to step down in a pretty strong and aggressive way. Pelosi led a letter of 40 members of Congress demanding that the United States condition their aid towards Israel, a position that only Bernie Sanders would take a few months earlier, Bernie Sanders and the squad. What do you make of this challenging time, I think, in U.S. politics, mostly on the Democrat side, but also a little bit on the Republican side? We're starting to see it with an isolationist strand. How does Israel deal with the minimization of support, the lowering of support from certain elements in politics?
We take tremendous efforts to maintain the relations between Israel and America as a bipartisan relationship. We think it's very important for us to be able to work with whoever the American people votes for. We expect it to be the other way around too. So I did not appreciate the stance of Mike Schumer. I do not appreciate the stance of Nancy Pelosi. We do not go into internal politics, and this is what we did in our visit, although we realize it's a presidential election year and it's very challenging, and we believe that many of the statements coming from America are in the light of this presidential campaign. But we will continue to do everything in our power to maintain the relations between Israel and America on the bipartisan level. We will have to work with whoever, and we will respect the choice of the American people.
Hopefully they reciprocate as well. Hopefully the United States government reciprocates as well. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, Today's Tuesday. This will come out tomorrow or Thursday. So I have to put that on camera because so many things are moving so quickly. Reports today are that the ICC are going to issue arrest warrants likely against the Prime Minister, against the Defense Minister, and the Chief of Staff of the IDF. Nobody really knows. They know they've been interviewing. It's been reported that the ICC has been interviewing people in Gaza in their investigation. What do you make of this ICC investigation? Israel's not a member state of the ICC, neither is the United States, but it seems like it can have some far-reaching implications. What do you make of this?
I'm very concerned about that, because basically what it means is that the ICC is going to deny Israel's right to defend itself. This is what it is. This is what we do. We did not initiate this war. On October 6th, children in Gaza, as well as the Gaza envelope, were sleeping in their bed peacefully. Hamas broke this silence by launching the most severe, horrific attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And this is not something that we can accept in any other way than to eradicate Hamas. And you know who says this? The Arab leaders says. Of course, they cannot be open about it because there are certain things they can say not to quote than they can say publicly, because their people feel solidarity with the Gazans. They are part of the Arab nation, the great Arab nation, but they realize that Iran is as much a threat to them as it is to us, and that Hamas tried to achieve the stopping of the normalization between Israel and the Arab world. I was fortunate enough to be a minister in the government that signed the Abraham Accords. Not with one, but with 4 Arab countries. We were on the verge of expanding the circle of peace between Israel and the Arab world even further, and mainly with the most significant, probably one of the most significant countries in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia. This is what Hamas was trying to stop, realizing that if a war should occur, we cannot move on expanding the circle of peace. But gladly, so far, no country was backing off the Abraham Accords, as well as we hear quite positive comments coming from Saudi Arabia saying that the normalization with Israel is still on the table. Once we eradicate Hamas, I believe we can expand the circle of peace further, and potentially a peace agreement or a normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia could signify the end of the Israeli-Arab conflict. This is how big it is. And this is our goal. This is our mission. We cannot achieve that if Hamas stays.
Just a side note on the attack when Iran attacked Israel a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago now. The big surprise from my perspective wasn't that Saudi Arabia was involved, or the United States, or the UK, or France, but that Jordan actually opened its airspace and participated at least a little bit in the defense, which Jordan isn't really part of that alliance. They have a very complicated situation there. Were you surprised by their involvement in Israel's defense that day?
I think we should be very cautious and respectful towards our neighbors, not bringing difficulties to their policies. And we appreciate every country that will work to defend their soil, by the way, and their airspace, and to work against the radical regime of the Ayatollahs of Iran.
Understood. And back to the ICC, people are pointing to the fact that the ICC itself can't really enforce the arrest warrants. The member countries, but there's 134 of them, do have the ability to do that. Everyone that's sort of saying that trying to minimize the ICC's potential issuance of arrest warrants will point to Putin and the fact that they issued an arrest warrant to Putin. But we all know that today, the way the world, many in the world are looking at Israel, an arrest warrant from the ICC issued against the Prime Minister, for example, of Israel, will be treated differently maybe by many different countries than an arrest warrant against Putin. Have you been in touch with other member countries of the ICC to try to already minimize the impact of any warrant if it's issued?
First of all, yes, but I do not take it lightly. I take it very, very seriously. And I think if the ICC would do such a thing, they will hurt themselves. I would like to hear from any leader, and I have hosted many leaders since October 7th, mainly heads of parliaments, but also other leaders. I had meetings with President Macron of France, President Steinmeier of Germany, and other influential figures coming here to Israel, showing them Kfar Aza, Be'eri, Re'im, the kibbutzim, the areas that were struck bad on October 7th, and also showing them the footage, screening the footage of October 7th, the 47 minutes. I can tell you the response in 100% of the cases. 47 minutes are over, the lights goes on, and then utter silence. It could take a minute, it could take 2 minutes. No one can say a word. But then, when the silence is broken, they say, and I'm talking about foreign leaders, either they say with words or they say with their eyes, please wipe this evil off the face of the earth. Please, we will back you up. So far, although we hear callings from various countries to stop Israel, to cease fire, many of them understand that this needs to be done. This has to be done. They cannot stay. Hamas cannot stay ruling the Gaza Strip, or the cycle of violence never ends. For the sake of peace, it needs to be done. And so some of them may, for internal politics, say differently, which does not work for the benefit of ending this war, but on the contrary. But most of them, at least, I wouldn't say all of them, but most of them realize that this has to be done, and they would not have done it otherwise. So I asked the ICC, what would you have done differently? Would you not fulfill the number one mission and purpose for the establishment of a state, any state, for the existence of any state, to protect its civilians? No one would have done otherwise. Maybe others would have done more, because when we look at the what we call in the military jargon collateral damage, meaning civilians getting in harm's way, in other wars in the world, Mosul for instance, and other places, Afghanistan, you would see higher numbers, higher rates between civilians and terrorists than we have in Gaza. When military experts come to Israel to see what it is exactly, how the IDF is operating in the Gaza Strip, with all its challenges, with Hamas infiltrating to civil society, to residential areas, building terror tunnels underneath mosques, schools, hospitals. They say that no military in the history of warfare has done more than the IDF to avoid civilian casualties. That's a fact.
Absolutely. And the need to eradicate Hamas isn't just important for the peace of Israel, it's important for the peace of the West, because it's part of a larger, the way I see it, part of a larger war between extremism and Western values.
Imagine if other terrorist organizations, and as we know, we have terror organizations throughout the world, would learn the strategy of Hamas. They say, okay, so if we operate from heavily populated residential areas, we can get away with everything. Imagine how the world would look like if, God forbid, that happens. And we can only imagine who's next, because Israel is not going to be the only. Israel is not the only country that was struck by terror. We see it in Europe, we see it in America. But imagine if they find a way to get away with it, as Hamas does. They cannot get away with it.
You know, you spoke earlier about the strategy that Hamas has that everybody is familiar with now about attacking civilians and hiding by civilians and then having some sort of immunity. And in a way they were right, because the world has bought into their narrative, at least the news media, the mainstream media all over the world, continent by continent. Their strategy is working, which is very
not
dangerous
the American
for society,
public,
but not the American public.
American public.
Yeah. It's a big problem we have in our society. I know you have it here as well, the distrust in media. That's why alternative media spaces like this end up being so important, because people can have real conversations and be able to sense where someone's coming from, not just a 10-second tidbit that's then being pushed by different agendas. Let's just talk quickly about the hostage deal that is on the table now. It's being reported that Israel has offered, maybe up to 2 weeks ago, according to Hamas, this hostage deal. I believe it's up to 33 Israeli hostages in return of over 1,600, if I'm not mistaken, terrorists that are here convicted in Israeli prisons. Can you tell me a little bit about that? At the same time, it looks like the IDF is about to invade Rafah. Again, this is Tuesday. So when this comes out, the whole situation may be a little different, even though it's a day or two. Tell me a little bit about where we are at the deal, whatever you can share, and what that means for the goal of ending Hamas.
It's definitely a mission, a holy mission for our country, for our state, to bring the hostages back to their families. There are two ways to do it. First one is a deal, you mentioned it. The other one is a military operation. We had many hostages released by a deal. We had a few released by a military operation. And we believe to achieve a deal to release the hostages, we need two powers. First one is the military power. Second is the diplomatic power. So those two powers combined will put pressure, enough pressure on Hamas, and push them back with their backs to the wall until they will come up with a deal. Currently, the military operation, the military pressure will come from entering Rafah and finishing the 4 Hamas battalions that are still untouched, and they are in the Rafah region. And the diplomatic pressure is from these negotiations that goes on regarding the deal. We probably shouldn't go into the details for the benefit of this to succeed. This is not a way to conduct negotiations by telling the other side openly what you are willing to pay, what you are not willing to pay, and what's your strategy on that. So this is probably as far as we should go regarding this issue. But just to conclude, it is our mission to bring all the hostages back to their families. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I obviously respect that it's such a tense time in Israel, specifically related to this deal and whether we're going into Rafah or not, or what happens with one or the other. So I understand the sensitivity of that and respect that. This has been a really hard 6-7 months for the state of Israel, for the people of the state of Israel, and for the Jewish people all over the world. The only way I think we can find our sanity is through finding outlets and such. Your outlet is something that we've seen everywhere on a lighter note, which is your love for guitars. Oh. I share that. I've been playing guitar my whole life. I had a small stint as a professional musician. Didn't go well. It meant I was waiting tables most of the time. But you know, that's part of the journey. Tell me a little bit. Let's just end with this so people get to know you a little bit. And I haven't asked you this before. Tell me your favorite band right now in the United States, and then your favorite Israeli Israeli artist.
My favorite band is a British one, and it is Deep Purple. And my favorite guitarist is Richie Blackmore. And he plays an American guitar. He plays the Fender Stratocaster, iconic.
You're a real politician. I asked you for an American band. You give me a British band who plays an American guitar.
Well, American band. I love Metallica.
Oh, there you go.
I love Guns N' Roses. I love that kind of music, and I play this kind of music. And I love the originals of Jimi Hendrix, B.B. King, the great blues masters. And I probably have more American guitars than others. I have roughly around 15 guitars, mainly Fenders, some Gibsons, just a bit of Ibanez and Epiphones. I love guitars. But you didn't hear me playing the guitar since October 7th.
No.
Actually, my last performance was on October 4th. We were playing in Beersheba with a very Scarlet P, a very nice band. And in the audience there were two brothers, and they were cousins of a late guitarist that passed away recently, and this show was for his memory. And they took selfies with me, telling me how great it was, and they enjoyed it very much. And 3 years later, they were murdered on October 7th at the music festival. It touches all of us as Israelis, whether it's the first circle or the second circle. October 7th touches each and every one of us. And for us to be able, not only, as I said, to survive, but to grow from this event stronger, we must stay together. We must go through this one by the side of the other, shoulder to shoulder, as our soldiers are doing. This is the message. If I could bring one message to the people of Israel, that would be the message. We must stand together. Yes, I see the protest coming back. But you know what? It's the extremes that became more extreme. But they also became fewer. We see the protest before October 7th. It's not the same numbers. They are fewer, they are more extreme, they are wrong, and I hope some of them will hear me out. This is not the thing to do when our other enemies are watching. You said these are difficult times. You know what? We cannot honestly claim that the worst is over yet. A war with Hezbollah, quite different from a war with Hamas. Hezbollah is better equipped, better trained. We're talking about 150,000 to 200,000 warheads aimed at our civilians, some of which are precision-guided missiles, some of which are heavy warheads. We're talking about potential severe damage to infrastructure, to vital facilities. It's going to be quite different. Let me tell you, it's going to be quite different for Lebanon as well, for Hezbollah as well. But for us to be able to go into a better future for the next generations, we must stand together.
Absolutely. And the role of Israeli music, by the way, has been very powerful around the world. The artists coming around the world to help unite the country, the people of Israel all over, the Jewish people all over, and I know it's happening here as well. It's very powerful. Being a lover of Israel, coming to visit, coming during these times, for me, only, so you know, from my perspective, only strengthens my love for Israel, and I'm only more and more in awe of the society that's built here in the ancient land of Israel. And thank you so much for your time.
Let me use this platform to thank the American people, to thank our friends in America, standing by us, sending their support, solidarity visits, aid, equipment even for the soldiers. It means a lot, and it will be written in the books of history. When centuries from now, once we are all gone, people will learn what the world did in these times and where America stood, and they stand in the right places in the books of history. So I want to thank the American people for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Speaker Ohana. It's been an honor to be here with you. Really
Thank you, Gabe.
Thanks for everything.
Thanks a lot.